freezer door was still open when she started screaming. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing the colander I'd used for the pasta, and I heard her voice go from 0 to sharp in about half a second. Not words at first. Just that sound. The sound a person makes when they've found something they weren't expecting. I turned around slowly. I didn't rush. She was standing in front of the open freezer, her hand on the door, staring inside like something had crawled in there and died. Her husband came in from the living room. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood, and she pointed. Just pointed. Didn't say anything to him, just pointed at the freezer like it had personally offended her. I dried my hands on the dish towel and waited. That was the night everything changed. But to tell you how we got there, I have to go back about 14 months. To the day my son called me from a Denny's parking lot in Columbus, Ohio, and asked if I'd ever thought about selling my house. I had lived in that house for 31 years. My husband Walter and I bought it in 1991 for $112,000, which felt like the moon at the time. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a backyard that flooded every spring, and the kitchen that smelled like the previous owner's cigarettes for the first 2 years, no matter how many times I repainted. We raised our son Owen there. We brought his sister home from the hospital there. We planted a dogwood tree in the front yard that, the last time I saw it, had grown taller than the roofline. Walter passed in 2019, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to gone, which the doctor said was fast even by those standards. After that, the house was still mine, but it wasn't the same weight anymore. It was just square footage I was responsible for. Owen started calling more after Walter died, which I appreciated. He's my son, and I love him. He called every Sunday, sometimes twice a week, and we talk about nothing in particular. His job managing a distribution center outside Indianapolis, his daughter Piper's soccer games, the weather in both our states. I looked forward to those calls. I really did. So when he called that Tuesday from a Denny's parking lot and asked about the house, I didn't hear a warning. I heard my son, who was worried about me. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said. "You're out there alone. The house is too big for one person. What if you came and stayed with us for a while?" I asked what a while meant. "Just come see how it feels. You'd have your own space. Piper would love having you close, and honestly, I'd just feel better knowing you weren't alone." He sounded sincere. He always did. His wife's name is Amber. I want to be careful about how I describe Amber, because I spent a lot of time after everything happened trying to understand her rather than just be angry. I think that's the right approach. But I also don't want to soften what she did by over-explaining it. Amber is 39 years old. She grew up in Carmel, Indiana, which is one of those suburbs where the houses all look like they belong in a magazine, and the people who live in them are very aware of that. She has good taste, and she knows how to make a room look nice. She worked part-time doing social media for a local real estate agency. She is organized in the way that people are organized when organization is how they control things. When Owen and I talked about me moving in, Amber wasn't on the call. She joined later, after he'd already floated the idea, and she was enthusiastic in the way people are enthusiastic when something has already been decided. "We've been talking about converting the guest room for months," she said. "It gets the morning light. You're gonna love it." I should have asked more questions about boundaries, about money, about what exactly staying with us meant legally and financially. But I didn't, because Owen was my son and I trusted him, and because I was 68 years old and living alone in a house that smelled like Walter's absence, and I was tired. I sold the house that November for $247,000. After the mortgage payoff and fees, I walked away with a little under $190,000. I moved into their guest room, my room as Amber called it, with my clothes, my books, 2 boxes of photographs, and Walter's chair. The dogwood tree stayed. The first few months were fine. Not wonderful, but fine. Piper, who was 11, was genuinely happy to have me there. She'd knock on my door after school and tell me about things. Her friends, a book she was reading, whether the cafeteria's pizza was better on Tuesdays or Fridays. I'd make her hot chocolate and we'd sit at the kitchen table and she'd talk and I'd listen, and those were good afternoons. Owen was attentive at first. He'd check in, ask if I needed anything, make sure I was comfortable. Amber was polite. Polite in the way a hotel front desk clerk is polite. Efficient, surface level, not unkind, but with a quality to it that made you feel like you were a transaction being processed rather than a person being welcomed. I noticed, maybe 2 months in, that she kept a mental inventory of things I used. If I finished a half and half, she'd mention it within 24 hours, not as a complaint exactly, more like a notation. "Oh, we're out of creamer," said while looking at me. I started buying my own groceries. I'd drive to the Kroger on a Wednesday morning and come back with 2 bags, and I'd put my things on the second shelf from the bottom in the fridge, and that worked fine for a while, until March. Owen came to me in the middle of March with a look on his face that I recognized. It's the look he's had since he was 9 years old, when he wants something and doesn't know how to ask for it. His chin goes slightly forward and he doesn't quite meet your eyes. "Mom, can I talk to you about something?" We sat in my room. Walter's chair was in the corner. Owen sat on the edge of the bed. He told me that he and Amber had been having some financial difficulties. "Nothing catastrophic," he said quickly, "just tighter than he'd expected." His hours had been cut at the distribution center. They'd taken on some home renovation debt the previous year. New roof, the deck in the back. The credit card balance had gotten higher than he was comfortable with. "We were wondering," he said, "if maybe you could help us out, temporarily. Just a bridge loan kind of thing." I asked how much. He said $40,000. I want to be honest here. My first instinct was to say yes. Not because I wasn't surprised by the number, but because he was my son and I had the money, and I still, at that point, believed in the version of this situation where it all made sense, where I was helping my family get through a rough patch. I asked how they'd pay it back. He had an answer ready: $600 a month, no interest, or whatever interest I wanted. It was up to me. He said Amber had drawn up a simple repayment agreement, just so we'd all feel better about it being official. "Where is it?" I asked. "She's still working on it," he said. "She'll have it ready this week." A week became 2 weeks. Then 3. I asked twice about the agreement. Owen said Amber was finalizing it, that she wanted to make sure it was thorough. I took out $40,000 from my savings and gave it to him in a check made out to their joint account. I told myself the paperwork was just a formality. I told myself that's what families do. They trust each other. That was mistake number 1. In April, Amber asked me to sign some documents related to the household. She framed it as an administrative thing, something their accountant needed, related to having a dependent adult living in the home for tax purposes. She put the papers on the kitchen counter on a Saturday morning while I was having coffee, and she slid a pen toward me and said, "Just a signature and an initial here and here." I picked up the first page. It was dense, small print. I started reading, and she said pleasantly, "It's really just standard household paperwork, nothing complicated." "I'd like to read it," I said. "Of course," she said, and she stood there. There's something about a person standing over you while you read that makes the reading harder. I got through the first page, started on the second, and she said, "Still pleasant. The accountant needs it by Monday, so we're a little crunched." I initialed. I signed. I handed it back. That was mistake number 2. I don't know exactly when things shifted in the house, but by May I felt it, a tightening, like the walls had moved a half-inch closer without anyone admitting it. Amber started referring to the kitchen as my kitchen, not aggressively, just casually. "I like to keep my kitchen organized a certain way. Could you make sure dishes go back where they belong in my kitchen? I'd been washing my own dishes and putting them away for 6 months, but now there was a right place for things, and apparently I hadn't been finding it." She moved my groceries. I had my shelf, second from the bottom right side of the fridge. One morning I opened the refrigerator and my yogurt and my lunch meat and my orange juice were gone, not thrown away. Moved to the back of the bottom shelf behind Piper's juice boxes and a container of Amber's meal prep chicken. I moved them back. The next morning, they were moved again. I didn't say anything. I didn't know yet that I should. The moment that I keep coming back to, the one I've turned over in my mind 100 times since, happened on a Thursday in June. I had gone to the grocery store, a big shop, because I'd noticed the refrigerator was nearly empty and Piper had mentioned they were out of her cereal, and I thought, I'll just get some things for the house. Not just for me, for everyone. I spent $140 at the Kroger, and I'd put everything away when I got home. The milk in the door, the produce in the crisper, Piper's cereal in the cabinet. That evening, Owen's work friend Craig came over with his wife for dinner. Amber had apparently been planning a specific menu. She'd bought things earlier in the day that I didn't know about. The fridge was now full. At 7 o'clock, I came downstairs to get a glass of water. Amber was in the kitchen with Craig's wife, laughing about something. She saw me open the refrigerator, and she said, and I want to be precise about her tone, because it wasn't a yell, it was something worse than a yell. She said very clearly, very evenly, "Actually, can you not go through the refrigerator tonight? I have it organized for dinner." I stood there with my hand on the refrigerator door. "I just need water," I said. "There's the Brita on the counter," she said. And she turned back to Craig's wife and kept laughing. I got my water from the Brita. I walked back upstairs. I sat in Walter's chair in the dark and I thought, I bought $140 worth of food for this refrigerator 3 days ago and I was just told not to touch it. And then I thought, what did I sign in April? That was the question that changed everything. I didn't have a copy of what I'd signed. Amber had taken the papers. I'd been in such a hurry, or been made to feel like I should be in such a hurry, that I hadn't asked for one. I called my friend Rosalie, who I've known since we were both young mothers at the same church in the 90s. Rosalie's second husband is a retired attorney, not real estate or contracts specifically, but he knew enough to tell me that what I described, dense documents, pressure, no copy, was a pattern he'd seen before and that I should find out what I signed before I did anything else. I started looking. I went through the filing cabinet in my room. Nothing. I checked my email for anything Amber might have sent. There was nothing there either. But in an old text thread from April, I found a photo Amber had texted me for your records, a blurry, poorly lit photo of one page from the documents. I zoomed in until I could read it. The language was about residency and financial contributions, about what happened to personal property and contributed funds in the event of a change of living arrangement. I am not a lawyer, but I understood enough to know that what I had signed was not standard household paperwork. I called a real estate attorney in Indianapolis named Mr. Kowalski. His office was on the north side of the city, and I drove there on a Tuesday while Owen was at work and Amber was at her yoga class. I brought the text photo. I brought my bank statement showing the $40,000 transfer. I brought every piece of paper I had. Mr. Menine. Kowalski read everything I gave him in about 20 minutes. Then he looked at me over his glasses and said, "Tell me, did you have any independent legal counsel when you signed this?" "No," I said. "Did you receive a copy?" "No." He nodded slowly. "That's going to matter?" What followed was 4 months I don't entirely want to relive. My lawyer sent a letter. Owen called me, confused and then angry, wanting to know what I was doing. I told him I wanted to know what I'd signed. He said it wasn't what I was making it out to be. Amber said nothing directly to me. She went very quiet in a way that was somehow louder than anything she could have said out loud. The document, as it turned out, had language that could be interpreted to mean that the money I'd given them, the $40,000, was a gift, not a loan, and that any personal property I brought into the home was considered part of the household estate in the event of my leaving voluntarily. Walter's chair, my jewelry, my car. Mr. Kowalski said the document was poorly written and would be difficult to enforce, especially since I had no copy and had clearly signed under time pressure. He said the more important issue was getting me out of the house safely and recovering what I could. The negotiation took 8 weeks. I will not pretend it wasn't painful, because my son was on the other side of it, and every conversation we had through our lawyers was a version of him and me not being able to talk to each other. I kept thinking about Sunday phone calls. I kept thinking about the Denny's parking lot and how relieved I'd felt when he said he wanted me close. In the end, they returned $32,000 of the $40,000. My attorney said we could push for the full amount, but it would mean a longer process, and I had already decided something. I did not want to spend any more of my life waiting. I took the $32,000. I signed the exit agreement. I arranged to move out on a Friday in October. The night before I left, I went down to the kitchen late. The house was quiet. Everyone was asleep. I opened the refrigerator. I stood there in the cold light for a moment, looking at Amber's organized shelves, her labeled containers, her exact and careful system. I took out my orange juice, the last container I had on my shelf, and I poured myself a glass. I stirred the counter in the dark kitchen, and I drank the whole glass slowly. Then I went back upstairs. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I didn't leave a note. I had thought about leaving a note, but everything I tried to write sounded either too angry or too forgiving, and neither one was exactly true. The freezer. I have to tell you about the freezer. That's where I started this story, isn't it? Amber standing in front of the open freezer, pointing. Before I left, I had reorganized the freezer, not dramatically, just moved a few things around, put my frozen meals in the front, rearranged the ice cream that Amber kept in a specific order, flavor by flavor, in the back left corner. She'd moved it back at some point. Of course she had. But I had left a bag of my frozen vegetables, a big bag of peas, my brand, the kind I'd bought myself, on the shelf I considered mine, right in the middle. I didn't take it with me. I left it there on purpose, not as sabotage, more as evidence, I suppose. Proof that I had been there, that the space had been mine too. That was what she found when she opened the freezer that evening after I'd moved out. That was why she was pointing. Not at anything dangerous or ruined, just at a bag of peas where she hadn't expected anything to be. I was not there to see it, obviously. Piper texted me about it later, with a string of confused emojis. Mom was really upset about the peas, she wrote. I don't really get why. Tell her she can throw them away, I texted back. Or she can eat them. Either way. I live in a one-bedroom apartment now in a building about 4 miles from where I used to live in Fairhaven, the town I moved to in 1991 and never quite left. The complex has a small courtyard and a woman named June on the second floor who knocks on my door sometimes with extra zucchini from her sister's garden. I'm on the third floor. The morning light comes in at an angle that hits the kitchen table just right. I put Walter's chair by the window. It's the first thing I see when I come out of the bedroom. I started talking to it sometimes. Not because I think he can hear me, but because the habit of turning to him is still in my body even when he isn't in the room. I paid for the apartment with the money from my house sale, minus what I'd lost. My savings aren't what I planned them to be at 69. I work part-time at a bookstore 2 mornings a week, which I genuinely love. The owner is a woman in her mid-50s named Patricia, not related to anyone in this story, and she makes very strong coffee and doesn't ask questions. Owen called me 3 times in October. I didn't answer. He texted once in November, a short message that said he was sorry for how things went and that he hoped I was doing okay. I read it 4 times. Then I put my phone down and didn't respond for 2 weeks. When I did, I wrote back, I'm doing okay. I hope you are too. That's all I had. Piper texts me sometimes, still. She told me she made the travel soccer team. I sent her a card with $20 and a note that said I was proud of her. She texted back a photo of her in her uniform. She was grinning, missing one of her side teeth. She looked like Owen at that age. She looked like someone who still has a long way to go before she understands what the adults around her are actually doing. I hope by the time she figures it out, it costs her less than it cost me. People ask me sometimes, friends, Rosalie, the women in my Thursday morning walking group, what I would have done differently. I have a real answer to that now, which took me a while to find. I would have read slower. Not just the documents, though. Yes, those. I would have read the situation slower. I would have paid attention to what I noticed and not explained it away because it was uncomfortable to believe. I noticed things about Amber from the beginning. The way she framed the guest room as a favor she was doing, the way Owen never quite made eye contact when money came up, the way my things kept moving in the refrigerator like they were being slowly relocated outside the boundary of what was considered mine. I noticed all of it. I just didn't let myself know it. That's the thing about trusting people you love. You give them the benefit of the doubt as a way of protecting yourself from the truth. It feels like generosity, but sometimes it's just avoidance. I told myself the moving groceries were Amber being particular. I told myself the paperwork was a formality. I told myself the $40,000 was a bridge loan and not a test of how much I could be moved before I pushed back. I was wrong each time. But here is the thing I did not expect to learn. I came out the other side still recognizably myself. I am still the woman who lived in a house for 31 years and planted things in the yard and raised children and made it through loss and still gets up on Thursday mornings to walk 3 miles with friends. The money is different. The situation is different. The relationship with my son is complicated in ways I don't know if we'll untangle. But I'm here. I'm in an apartment with morning light and a chair by the window and a neighbor who brings zucchini. I poured my own orange juice in someone else's kitchen in the dark, and I didn't ask permission, and I didn't apologize, and I walked back upstairs. That felt like something. Honestly, it still does. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. Not obsessively, I'm past that. But in the quiet way you turn something over when you're not trying to anymore, and it just comes up on its own while you're washing dishes or watching the light move across the kitchen table in the morning. What I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened to me was sudden. It only felt that way. Every choice Amber made, moving my groceries, standing over me while I read, framing the paperwork as a formality, those were not accidents. They were a system. Small, incremental, each one easy to explain away on its own. And every choice I made, handing over the $40,000 initialing without finishing the page, not asking for a copy, those weren't accidents either. They were the choices of a woman who wanted so badly to believe that love was enough to make a situation safe that she stopped paying attention to whether the situation actually was. That's the part I had to sit with. Not what Amber did, what I allowed. I'm not saying I deserved it. I want to be clear about that. What they did was wrong, legally, and more importantly, just as a matter of how you treat another person. Owen knew what those papers were. He knew, and he handed me a pen anyway. That is something I'll carry about my son for a long time, maybe always. But responsibility and blame aren't the same thing. And somewhere in my late 60s, I finally learned the difference. Responsibility means I had information I didn't use. I felt things I didn't act on. I saw the groceries move and told myself it was nothing. And I kept telling myself that until I was sitting in an attorney's office in Indianapolis trying to figure out what I'd signed away. The thing about integrity, and I mean real integrity, not the word on a motivational poster, is that it's not just about what you do to other people. It's about what you're willing to see clearly about yourself. I had to look at the version of me that signed those papers and understand her. She was scared of being alone. She was tired of rattling around in a house that felt too big. She wanted her son, and she was willing to blur some things at the edges to have that. That woman made some expensive decisions, but she also, eventually, called Rosalie. She drove across the city to a lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning while her son was at work. She packed her things and she left, and she didn't apologize for leaving. And that woman, the one who finally moved, is also me. That's the part I didn't expect. You don't become a different person when you finally stand up for yourself. You just become more fully the person you already were. Piper texts me pictures of herself in her soccer uniform. Owen sent a message saying he was sorry. I don't know yet what I'll do with that sorry. Some doors, once you understand what was behind them, you don't rush back through. But you don't have to burn them down either. You can just leave them closed for now and tend to your own life and see what grows. My apartment gets good morning light. I have Walter's chair by the window. I have a bag of peas I left in a freezer in Indianapolis, and honestly, I think about those peas sometimes and I almost laugh. Almost.